have to say, Dr. Murison, that I believe that he did a staunch disservice to those petitioners who put their faith in him to lead this debate by not actually forming any opinion.
Providing a challenge, we're the ones out doing stuff every day. We may only have 5 MPs, but boy, they're certainly being felt. Face it, they're in pretty big trouble already. So I think if this campaign is persistent and peaceful, they can get change.
Vindictive. That's how one minister described the family farm tax. But why such strong words? As tractors block London streets and farmers fight for survival, we're peeling back the layers of a policy that's tearing rural communities apart.
Across the country, more than 148,000 people have signed the petition because they know, just as we do on these sides, on these benches, that the family farm tax is wrong.
If they see local communities getting behind these families, they're going to start getting scared, and they're going to start putting pressure on number 10. And let's see, announcements on inheritance tax were first made. Pleased to be here today. Also pleased to see the campaign is ramping up. It's growing right across the country. And the message I've been putting to them, I think they're listening to, which is 100 Labour MPs now representing rural seats.
The truth? It's more shocking than you might think. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. As the farmers' protests flooded London's streets, a different scene unfolded within the hallowed halls of Parliament. The benches on one side were packed, buzzing with energy and concern, but across the aisle, a stark contrast emerged. Conspicuously empty seats where Labour MPs should have been. The absence spoke volumes, echoing louder than any speech could have.
Absent. And what message does it send? That the Labour Party have clearly filled the benches up on the other side of this House, but only 4 members of the Labour Party spoke. And I must say, what an image for our farming community to take away from today's debate. Where on earth is the Secretary of State for DEFRA? We have the Shadow Secretary of State sat beside me. Where on earth is the farming minister in this debate, despite having an opportunity to voice their concerns in this petitions debate, which effectively is a 3-hour debate, of which, Mr. Chairman, all 5 of them that spoke.
The no-show of key Labour figures was nothing short of shocking. Most notably, the farming minister, the very person tasked with representing agricultural interests, was nowhere to be seen. It's a move that left many scratching their heads and others seething with frustration. After all, wasn't Labour supposed to be the party of the people, the champions of the working class? Apparently that sentiment doesn't extend to the fields and farms of Britain. The contrast between Labour's pre-election promises and their current actions, or rather inactions, couldn't be more stark. They talked a big game about supporting rural communities, about understanding the challenges faced by farmers. But when it came time to show up and fight for those very people, Labour was MIA. It's enough to make you wonder if their promises were worth the paper they were printed on. In the midst of this deafening silence, the minister's pointed questions rang out. What message does this send? Indeed, what message does it send when the opposition party can't be bothered to show up for a debate on one of the most pressing issues facing the country? It sends a message of indifference, of neglect, of a party so out of touch with rural Britain that they couldn't even muster the energy to fake interest. The consequences of this absence could be far-reaching for rural communities. When their voices aren't heard in Parliament, when their concerns are met with empty chairs instead of engaged lawmakers, it's not just a political slight, it's a betrayal of trust. It's telling farmers and rural residents that their livelihoods, their traditions, their very way of life isn't worth the time of day for Labour MPs. But the betrayal runs deeper than empty seats. While Labour MPs couldn't be bothered to show up for British farmers, their government is apparently more than happy to spend over £536 million on foreign farming initiatives. That's right, while British farmers struggle with inheritance taxes and mounting pressures, Labour is funneling money into low-carbon agriculture in Brazil and supporting new farmers in Rwanda. As Shadow Cabinet Minister Robert Jenrick put it, that will feel like a slap in the face for many British farmers. And he's not wrong. How can Labour justify neglecting their own agricultural sector while playing savior to farmers abroad? It's a question that demands answers, but with Labour's continued absence from these crucial debates, those answers seem unlikely to come. While Labour MPs play political games, real lives hang in the balance. Meet George, an 80-year-old farmer whose story exposes the human cost of political negligence. As the clock ticks towards a critical deadline, George's lifetime of work teeters on the edge of becoming either a cherished legacy or a financial catastrophe. George's story isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about a man who's poured his heart and soul into the land for decades. Now facing a terminal illness, he's confronted with a cruel twist of fate. The looming April 26th deadline isn't just another day on the calendar for George. It's the difference between leaving behind a thriving family farm or saddling his loved ones with a crippling inheritance tax bill exceeding £1 million. The new inheritance tax changes, touted as a solution, feel more like a slap in the face to farmers like George. Sure, there's now a £1 million cap on tax-free inheritance, with anything above that taxed at 20% instead of the usual 40%. But for many farmers whose wealth is tied up in land and equipment rather than cash, this solution is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Expert analysis paints a grim picture. These changes could lead to the breakup of family farms across the country. Imagine generations of agricultural heritage being parceled off and sold to the highest bidder, all because farmers can't liquid assets to cover an arbitrary tax bill. It's not just about losing farms, it's about losing a way of life. But the consequences go beyond the immediate financial hit. The mental health of farmers is under significant strain due to these pressures. Reports indicate that some farmers, like George, are contemplating extreme measures. It's a stark reminder that behind every policy decision, there are real people facing real consequences. The long-term effects of these tax changes are equally concerning. We're looking at a potential decrease in confidence within the farming sector. What does that mean in practical terms? It means farmers thinking twice before investing in new equipment or infrastructure. It means a slowdown in agricultural innovation at a time when we need it most. So what solutions has Labour proposed for cases like George's? The deafening silence speaks volumes. While they're busy throwing money at foreign farming initiatives, British farmers are left wondering if anyone in Westminster gives a damn about their plight. The minister's impassioned plea for rural Britain isn't just political grandstanding. It's a desperate cry for help echoing across the countryside. Critics like Nigel Farage are sounding the alarm, calling Labour's actions a betrayal against our agricultural industry and rural communities. But it's not just about politics. It's about the very backbone of our nation. As the clock ticks down for farmers like George, facing crippling inheritance taxes, we're left wondering, will Labour's deafening silence become the funeral dirge for British farming? The government's focus on foreign aid and low-carbon agriculture abroad might score political points, but at what cost to our own food security? The minister's fury lays bare a stark reality. Our farmers are being hung out to dry while we pour millions into overseas projects. It's time to ask some hard questions. Are we willing to sacrifice the future of British agriculture on the altar of political expediency? The answer may determine not just the fate of our rural communities, but the very food on our tables.